Hello and welcome to another episode of Seanice and Nancy. Last week it was Sharon and Nancy. I feel like I need to clarify that. Sharon is my middle name. I feel like I'm getting into my Sharon era, but Seanice is my first name. So anyway, we're family here now, so that doesn't really matter. It's good to have you back for another episode. How are you doing, Nance?
Very, very well. And looking forward to this. It's been so nice to hear all the feedback.
Yes.
Because sometimes you think you might just be, whistling into the void. So it's really nice to hear that other people have similar experiences to us, and some of this stuff is resonating. So that's really good.
Yeah. So last week, I think we talked about, imposter syndrome and how to spot it, how to deal with it. And we got such beautiful feedback from that. And one of the pieces of feedback we got as well was business. And it's interesting that we haven't thought about the fact that imposter syndrome can also happen to entrepreneurs and people starting their own businesses. So we felt like it would be a good segue to focus this discussion on how do you know if you should start a business?
So quick question. Do you think everybody should?
Hey, I know when the questions are coming that are going to be but go ahead.
Interesting. Do you think everybody should own a business?
This is such a great question. And own a business? No. Simple answer.
Why?
Should everybody own a business? I believe that owning a business comes with a specific skill set. And I am also a big believer that just because you're not an entrepreneur, you don't own a business, or you're not a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer, does not make you any better or any worse than everyone, right? If you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, that fish will always be found wanting. So I suppose the discussion for me around that is everybody a fish? Like, does everybody have what it takes to own a business? And so I do believe people get trapped and in cycles of unhappiness because they feel like they should own a business because everybody's owning a business, and then it doesn't work. And now their self-worth is tied up in that failure. I take that from the fact that Uganda, where we both come from, we're Ugandan, has one of the highest entrepreneurial rates in the world, right? You throw a rock as an entrepreneur who's starting a business. But is it really the way to go for those who don't feel that calling? What do you think? It sounds like you have a different perspective on that.
I do. I think everybody should own a business. Now, I don't think everybody should run a business, but I think everybody should own a business or part of a business. And I'll qualify that by saying, when I talk about a business, I'm talking about equity, right? And there are many ways
Oh, then that was a trick question. No.
You hate it when I do that.
You can't be asking trick questions like that. Okay. But okay. Because now I'm going to agree with you, because that's just logic and common sense.
Like, you
should invest.
No, but it's not logically common sense, because I suppose that's the interesting thing, right? The way we think about investing and the way we think about, because I actually think that if you think of investing as owning equity, that's a different mindset.
Kind of
from when you're thinking of investing as somewhere to store your money.
Although neither is wrong.
Neither is wrong.
Like, if your approach is somewhere to store your money, I think there's a particular way you think about that. And if it's that you want to own a piece of something, there's a way to think about that. If it's about leaving a legacy or something for your children, then there's a way to think about that. And then you're not going to be high risk investing, right? So I think there are ways in which you can structure that investment depending on your intention.
Sure. But let's rewind maybe to why we're talking about this in the first place.
Sure.
And what are the things that come up for people when they think about business and investing? Obviously, there's this idea of, especially when you get to our age,
40.
Yes. 40, 42.
Yeah.
You start to think about legacy. You start to think about retirement. Well, hopefully you've been thinking about it for a while and they're not just starting now. But these sorts of things become, I think, very front of mind. And even if you're in your 20s, it will benefit you to be thinking about these things now.
Yeah.
And so you probably hear this, that one of the surest ways, if you're going to try and be rich, is going to be through a business, right? Can we just explore that? Because I've heard time and time again that there is no employment that is created to make you rich. So do you think it's fair to say that if your goal or at some point in life you would like to be rich,
do you want to be rich or do you want to be financially free? Like those are two different things.
They are two different things, but it's hard to be financially free when you're poor.
Well, yeah, true. One can lead to the other, but financial freedom looks different for people. For example, I may not have a yacht. I may not have a private jet, but I'm financially free. I can afford all of my costs. I have more coming in than is going out. I have set up different kinds of vehicles to provide for me. And in so doing, I can choose to live my days the way I want, because financial freedom is also about time freedom.
Absolutely.
The ability to do what you want when you want. I want to go and take my child for a walk. I can do that. I don't have to be, constrained in an office doing a 9 to 5. But I feel like I'm a bit off track here. So back to what you were saying about the importance of this particular discussion in regards to whether or not you should start a business and owning a business and starting a business, because also owning a business, it takes a bit of time. But I feel like you don't just rock up and own a business. Like it takes a bit of time, bit of work, Well,
like anything else.
Yeah.
But I suppose the thesis I would submit is that, if you've got certain goals in life, around money, whether that's financial freedom, time freedom.
Yeah.
I think, the definition of rich really would be you can do what you want with your time.
Yes.
And you can do what you want with your money.
Yes.
And I think for many people, that's an aspiration.
It is.
And so if we look at it that way, I suppose my question was, is employment an engine for that? Or is it the case that in most cases, not in every case, but in most cases, employment is not going to be the engine for that? Because one, your time freedom is severely limited by employment.
For sure.
And two, your money freedom is also capped.
Yes.
To a great extent. Yes, you can climb the ladder and, achieve, great measures of wealth. But in most cases, it will be capped by one, the company you work for, and two, dynamics that are majorly outside of your control.
100%.
It's not necessarily a case of the more you put in, the more you get out.
Yes. And I think these are very, how do I say it, politely, is that one thing I've learned in the last 40 years about thinking is that the quality of your thinking is usually determined by the quality of your questions. What do you ask yourself? What do you ask other people? And I'm very hesitant to, and I know you are too, I've seen this with you a lot. You don't prescribe to generalities. True, generalities are helpful when we think about concepts. And it is true. Stereotypes exist for a reason. Majority of people will do this. Majority of people will think like this. But I like these kind of discussions because we don't want to think like the majority. We want to peel back the layers and look at the discussion from angles that people don't ordinarily look at it. Now, I don't believe that you cannot become rich by being employed. I actually think you can if you are smart about how you go about it. For example, if you choose the right kind of company, the right kind of mentor, someone who actually wants to give back and grow you, you could become a shareholder in that business. You didn't start the business. Okay, now back to business ownership. You snook at me. This woman does these Jedi mind tricks. Okay, but you didn't set out
back to
be.
Equity.
I'm coming back to equity and ownership and all of those, but I want us to be careful that equity and ownership and all that are not a silver bullet. It's not a panacea that sort of relieves all your discomforts, because it comes with its own challenges, right? And it's all about, if you focus, I don't want people to focus on, do I own the business? That's not the answer. You need to focus on how am I capturing value? Because actually, business, investment, entrepreneurship, all of these things have one thing in common: capturing value. Do you know how many entrepreneurs start businesses but don't capture value? How many gaps they leave? They're leaving money on the table, left, right, and center. Maybe they're spreading themselves too thin instead of focusing on one thing that could actually be the thing that really propels them to greatness. Maybe they're micromanaging. They're not leaving their team to take on more. It feels like I'm talking about myself because these are all lessons I've learned, right? I early on in my business, I was very much a control freak because I have a thing about quality. I cannot stand it when things are not like 100%.
Please disregard our first
video when it comes to that statement, because the first video we did on Peace and Purpose was not up to scratch.
I think we were operating on the done is better than perfect.
Yes, we were. But God was also humbling us to let us know that it's about the message, not about all the stuff around it. But I think my point is that if we focus on capturing value and creating value for others, you will see money come into your life that will allow you to be financially free or even rich if you so wish it. You have to choose that. And I think that's what a mentor once told me. I was complaining about how I'm struggling with my business. I'm just breaking even. I'm never like rolling in the cash. And he said, because you haven't decided to. And I was so miffed because I'm like, what are you talking about? Of course I want this, but deciding and choosing are also very different. Deciding is deciding to go deeper in the conversations like we're doing now. Deciding is saying, okay, let me not just listen to the obvious stuff. Let me actually listen to also what I want. Because the reason I said I don't think everyone should own a business and that it's a skill set is because not everyone has the patience to sit down and the trade-offs that come with owning a business, take those on. And is that wrong? I don't think so.
Okay. I hear what you're saying, but let me expand my thesis perhaps, or, modify it to what you're saying, because I would have said that I think not everyone should run a business, but you should own equity, right?
You should own equity. Yeah.
And I suppose to evolve it to what you're saying is you should be able to capture value, whether
100%.
That's in a business where you're working for someone else.
Yeah.
Make sure you're working your way up to where you own a piece of it.
100%. Or there's even potential for it to get there.
Yes, potential for it to get there. Or maybe you're going to start off a franchise or you're going to do something where you own some value that you capture.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the sense that, if you're fired tomorrow, you're not left holding nothing. So I think a good long-term perspective is, how am I capturing value that I own in the role I'm doing, whether I'm in a job, right? Because it could be in a job building your brand,
Absolutely.
Could be a job building your expertise.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who've spent their jobs building the brand and afterwards been able to consult and work for themselves. That's you're absolutely right.
Yeah, so they are capturing some value.
They're capturing value.
Which they then own and they can then leverage, right?
Yeah.
And so I think, yes, you're right to evolve the discussion beyond just running a business. I think it's about, like you say, owning and capturing that value. And the importance of that is, I think, this mindset of when you go into a business, even as an employee, how you talk about your role, I find is quite important.
Oh, talk about that.
I always found myself saying, I always find it interesting that there's a difference between saying, I work for this company and I work at this company. So I always consciously try to say I work at this company because I'm working for myself.
Oh, that's so much depth in that. I have to interject there because the way we speak to ourselves will consistently create the results we see. If you sit and look at the results you have in your life impartially, and I'm also talking to myself, completely objectively, they are as a result of the things you say to yourself on a daily basis. And because that in itself is so powerful. I can't tell you how much of how we talk about job creation, how we talk about whether you should start a business, is in all the things that we say to ourselves. I've seen people say, I'm good at this. Oh, I'm not good with numbers. Guess what? Self-fulfilling prophecy. How are you going to say you're not good with numbers and you want to run and own a business? Do you see what I mean? Like you have to get your head around that skill set. I was asked the other day about investing and what's my experience with investing, because I do angel invest. So I invest in like smaller companies and things like that. Things are passion projects. For the longest time, I did not say to myself, I'm an investor. I didn't think I was an investor.
Because you're thinking, it's just a small thing.
It's $5,000. It's $2,000. It's money is money. If you pick up 5 rand or 10 shillings or 100 Uganda shillings, are you not going to put it somewhere? Even that little amount, it has value, right? So I just got really excited about what you said there because I could see directly the moment I then switched and started calling myself an investor. Can you believe what happened? I actually started looking for investments. But before it was like whoever comes and asks for a little bit of money and has a good business idea. Okay.
It was passive.
It was so passive. And yet I could see that from the small investments I'd made, some of them were starting to pay off. Not a lot, But isn't this how you build? You build little by little. You don't build a house by putting 1,000 bricks. You start with that first brick. And it was all because my language around what I was telling myself every day is I did not see myself. I did not speak to myself like an investor. And how else will anyone evaluate me if my own language to myself is so limiting?
I just have to throw this in there because I think this is why, God changed people's names in the Bible. Because, Isaac, son of my sorrow, becomes Israel. Because imagine going through your life being known as
son of my sorrow.
Hey. And God was like, no, we're not working with that. Abraham became Abraham, a father of many nations, even before he had a single child.
Wow. Yeah, that's profound.
And I think it speaks so clearly to what you're talking about. Yeah. What you call something is the first step because that's everything in life is created twice.
That's the first seed.
First in the speaking, in the saying.
Yes.
And if that aligns with God's word, then I think it does become, it does become a reality. But the other principle I think you've introduced here, which is so important, is that of small beginnings. Because you were talking about investing the little. And I think the question often when we talk about business and investing.
And should I start a business? Yeah.
Yes. People are wondering where to start.
Yeah. Or you hear this one, I don't have enough money. I hear that all the time.
Yes. But how many times have we seen, whether it's in our company or somewhere else, two people, one of them earns a very big salary, another one doesn't. But you'll find maybe the driver who's not earning much, he's got his own home.
Yes.
He's got equity. He's got a farm. He's got side income.
It's all in the mind. It's a matter of and I know that we hear this a lot. There's so many great speakers out there, so many great books that tell you that everything is created twice, once in the mind and then once in the real world. I don't know if I believe that in the literal sense. I think God doesn't plant a desire in you if he doesn't also give you the ability to make that desire come to fruition.
As long as it's aligned with him.
Absolutely. A desire that is aligned with him. Yes. And I think that this is where it falls apart because we start to think, we look at all the things we lack. Well, I don't have enough of a good last name. I don't have enough money. I don't have a backer. I don't have a mentor. Goodness, like the list is endless. But if I look at how you and I started Blue Flamingo, we had nothing. We didn't have a single cent. Fair enough.
Did we have nothing? Or is that another mindset?
Well, we had nothing material. Let me put it that way. Because
you never have nothing, right?
And I'll qualify. We didn't have anything in the sense of the world. We didn't have a bank account that was, bursting at the seams for us to go and rent our first office. Let me put it that way. So
basically, if we'd gone to a bank, they would have said, we can't back you.
Absolutely.
We can't give you anything.
If we'd gone to the bank,
you don't have anything.
The bank would have just told us, please hightail it out of here. I don't know why you're planning to start a business. When I say we had nothing, we didn't even have a business plan. Okay. Now this is because I hear people say, I need to first work on my business plan. Okay. We started because of a need to create. That for me, I don't know about Nancy, but for me, I love creating. I love the idea of there was nothing and now there's something. And when I look at my life, that's how my life has that's the trajectory of my life. There was a piece of land here. Now there's a house. There was no business here. Now there's a business. There were no employees here. Now there are employees or staff or teams and things like that. And I think following that instinct, that need to create has been my path. Now, for you, it might not be a need to create. It might be a need for security. Who says that that's wrong? For somebody else, it might be, I found a great product and this product can help many people. But at times, what I struggle with is that business books all tell us you must fill a need. Sometimes I'm just passionate and I like to do.
Sometimes the need is you.
But sometimes the need is me. I have a need. Right? And I'm not saying that this is not great advice, but I find that a lot of advice usually tells half of the story or the story according to James. And so Jennifer and Janet are left in the dark because their story doesn't look like that, or they're trying really hard to make their story look like that. I think it was James Clear who said that entrepreneurship, or is it business, is a vehicle for personal growth masquerading as entrepreneurship and a business.
But then, having said what you've said, why should anyone listen to us? Because we're just another James or, John, and just another story in a multiplicity of stories, which may or may not apply to you.
Very challenging question. Why should you listen to us? Because something might resonate, because we need more voices out there, because what you're saying or my experience, and this is the difference, right? Between advice and lived experience. Advice, I don't do. People come to me like, what do you think I should do? I'm like, I can ask you questions, but I'm not going to tell you what to do, because I'm not in your shoes. I don't know your specific circumstances. I don't know what God placed in your heart. And it would be so disingenuous of me to think that I do. And so why should people listen to us? Challenging question is because through other people's lived experiences, there's usually a nugget. 99% of what we're saying might not resonate with you. There might be that 1% that you're like, oh, I get it. I'm sitting here and I don't have the business plan either. I feel like I should go out there and do it. So you guys, you were successful with no business plan. And by the way, I'm not saying you shouldn't have a business plan, please. I developed a business plan. This is the part we don't talk about, right? I developed a business plan 6 years into my business, 5 years into my business. If I had it before,
probably wouldn't do it.
I wouldn't have started my business because on paper, it wasn't going to work. But after the fact, the structure of a business plan was still valuable. Do you see? It was still helpful to scale the business and continue growing the business. Just at a different point in the journey. So going back to the question of how do I know if I should start a business? Are there any sort of, I guess, hard and fast things that you feel concretely are things you should evaluate before you even think of starting a business?
Absolutely. I think you've correctly identified that there are some principles that are universal, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't bother to teach anybody anything ever.
True.
And which is why the Bible has stories, right? Because all of them are useful for instruction and teaching. And we can look at these lives and see parallels, which I think is the way you beautifully described why we listen to other people, but why we should still have our antenna up to say that applies to me.
That doesn't apply. Yes.
And have that discernment. But I think one of the principles that I feel is paramount in asking these questions is it has to start from inside. Yeah. And it starts because I think a lot of the business advice we get in the world externalizes our agency. Yeah. It says, look over there. What are people doing? Yeah. What's in the market? What's the, as you're saying, the need? Yeah. What's the USP? But I find that if you are rooted in discovering your God-given purpose, you're going to have a different journey. It's going to come from the inside. And what do I mean by that? When we look at the story of the woman in the Bible, of the woman with the oil and the jars, and Elisha, she was starving. She was, she came to him, maybe looking for a handout, saying, I'm going to be thrown in jail. My kids are going to be thrown in jail. I have so much debt. And, we're in a bad situation. And Elisha asked her, what do you have? And she said,
I don't know why, but I feel emotional right now. Go ahead.
Oh. But, she said, I have nothing. I have nothing.
I feel like there's going to be someone watching this who has nothing.
Who feels they have nothing.
Who feels they have nothing. Who's at that point.
And this is the point, right? Because when Elisha said to her, what do you have? And she said, I have nothing. It wasn't true. Because the very next thing she said, I have nothing but this little jar of oil. But that little jar of oil that she was overlooking, that was her salvation. And I love that when you read further on in the story, when that jar of oil is multiplied and she sells it and she has a business, Elisha tells her, now you go and your children and live on this. It was enough, not just for her, not just for her debts, but for her children to live off.
I have no idea why I'm getting so choked up right now. This is so weird. I think, okay, so I'm a big believer in energy. And I think that at times when we do certain things, timing matters, right? And it's not an accident that you sit somewhere, have a conversation, and God calls you and you feel like you have to say certain things, because on the way here, Nancy and I were like, okay, what are our talking points? Like, what are we going to say? And we were kind of talking about like riffing off and just saying what's on the heart and being really just a steward of what the message is supposed to be. But I just feel so compelled to say that I really have a feeling that's coming over me that there is someone going to watch this, listen to this, who feels they have nothing, like you said. And the conviction is that it's not true. You have so much inside of you. The world wants to tell you that material things are what beget you other things, and it is not. It is what you have inside of you to give, your talent, your God-given talent. And this is what I've realized in my business. We started with no money in the bank, but Nancy, fantastic graphic artist, fantastic at like creativity and all of that. And just those talents that we had is what we went and sold to people and said, we can do this for you. And we never compromised on quality. We packaged it well, ourselves well, because we understood that if we didn't value what God had given us and were able to represent it well in the world, then we were doing even that a disservice. And we didn't understand that like the way I'm talking about it now. It was almost an instinct, right? And you have to have an instinct for quality. You have to have an instinct of being a good steward of what He's given you. And part of that is getting out and serving. You have to get out and serve. So when you sit there and say, I have nothing, can you imagine how you are disrespecting God in that moment? What do you even mean? And so I struggle a lot with things like people saying, I need to go out and get funding. I need a VC. I need this. There's no time for that in a business. When a business perhaps needs to scale, has proven that there's market traction and that there's a need. I'm not saying that that's not wrong. I mean, that's not right. But I believe there are times in a business where that can be necessary. It's not necessarily at the beginning. That can be necessary, sorry. But I don't think it's always at the beginning. And the key for me here is that you are never starting with nothing.
Yes, absolutely. I believe God has baked into every one of us the keys to your destiny, the keys to your provision, the keys to your purpose. It's all in there. And you just need to stop looking everywhere else for it. You need to stop looking to, sometimes I'm hesitant to mentor people because I can see they're looking to me to give them answers.
Oh,
and I am not anybody's answer.
Yes.
No, God is the only answer. He has put in you the domain that you are supposed to rule over. He has made you a king of something, a queen of something. He has given you, the Bible says He gave us as people dominion over the earth, not over each other, but over the earth. And so there is something on this earth that He has given you particular dominion over. It could be a skill, it could be a gift, it could be a service, but He has given you something.
Yeah.
And the one thing that is probably holding you back is the fact that you're despising it. You are saying like that woman, I have nothing.
Just this little jar of oil.
Just this
but
little,
how it can multiply and how
it can multiply
yes.
if you start by recognizing it, by honoring it, and by being faithful with it. And I think that's the principle, isn't 100%. It? When you're starting a business, you don't look at what's out there. Where do I need to get to? What are other people doing? You look at what do I have? How can I be faithful with that? And once you're faithful with that, it will grow.
That's beautiful because I think it was Hakeem Belausagi. I love that guy. He's just so, I don't know. He has so much presence. And he talked about something called the fog in business. And he likened it to when you need to step out of your house and there's a lot of fog everywhere. You're only ever able to see the first step. And then after you step, then you see the next one. And what struck me about that is he's a very successful businessman. He's worked, I think it's telecoms and several other industries. For him to say, I honestly didn't have vision, because that's what he was saying. But we hear that these great rich people have this vision and they're smarter than us. And somehow they've got the crystal ball. It's really one foot in front of the other. It's just being able to say this. The first step is what? This is my talent. This is what I like to do. How do I serve? How do I create value? I recall listening to a story about, a preacher who started off as a radio presenter, and you put me on to him. I think he died in a car crash. I forget his name, in a plane crash. Sorry.
You're talking about Miles Monroe?
I think Miles Monroe, right? And he had the gift of the gab. I mean, he could, when he'd sit at a mic, he'd be like, oh yes, and the power to the glory, blah, blah, blah. And you're just like, ooh, he flows so well and he rhymes with everything, all practice and rehearsed. But he started off as a janitor, if I'm not correct. Now I hope I'm getting my people and my stories right here, but he started off in a what is considered a lowly position. But what did he do? And the reason it resonated with me is because that's exactly my trajectory. Started off in sort of a lowly position. I learned everything about running a business from being employed. I went to every department. I wanted to know how finance worked. I wanted to know how marketing worked, how sales worked. I would sit with people and tell them, tell me what you do. How do you do it? So when you get an invoice, what does that mean? It goes, but that curiosity, that ability to, what you were saying, don't despise where you are. Learn as much as you can. That was the only way I was able, without a business degree, without sort of a PhD in whatever it is, start my own business, because I had that information from working, at 3 different radio stations, at Capital FM in Kenya and Sanyo in Uganda and Clouds FM, and just doing more. I always just put my hand up. I'm like, is there a job that needs to be done? I'll do it. And guys are like laughing at me like, you're not even going to get paid for that. I'm like, I don't mind. When you're young, you have energy and time. Do things without being paid, because that is your PhD. That is where you're going to learn. And it's that extra that you give, that service that you give. That's what you get back.
No, it's really interesting. I hadn't made necessarily that connection, but now that you're speaking, I can see that too in my journey. And it's not something I went out and said, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But it seems sort of like a natural thing. I mean, if I think back to my time in Kenya, I really wanted to start this series about, ordinary people doing extraordinary things. But, there wasn't really a budget. Nobody was interested in that because it wasn't hard politics. And I remember I got a friend of mine. We would go out and shoot, and we were like shooting in Dagoretti and all these strange places. Not that Dagoretti is strange, but, they weren't very, posh places that news anchors would normally
typically frequent.
Let's put it that way. And there was no reason for me to do this, this thing, other than I had a passion for it, much in the way that you're describing it. And, I was paying for my own fuel and my own transport just because I believed in this idea.
Yeah.
And I can't make the direct connection to how that then got me, noticed by the BBC. But I think there is a connection in terms of
There's definitely a connection.
Just your approach and how you think about things.
You know what's really strange? Even energetically speaking, there's a connection. If you are a person who gives more than you ask for, not receive. Okay. Because I want to be very clear that people who are typically givers, they receive in many ways. Some of them, they don't even know. Whether it's protection, divine protection, etc., you're receiving. But if you tend to give a lot more than you ask for, I promise you I've seen this in my life. I'm not saying it's rosy, that things always work out. That's not what I'm saying. But you do receive favor that things sort of kind of work out for you. There was a time we went through a very difficult time in our business, our joint business. And I won't disclose all the details, but we were in the hole for a sum of money that even now I don't know how we got out of. And it was simply because of the person we hired to do our finances at the time made a horrible mistake, and I took full responsibility, right? Because you cannot say I outsourced it to this person and they were doing some things in the back there that I wasn't aware of, or why weren't you checking, right? And that's the thing, you take full responsibility. But at the time, it was that the only thing that got us out of that was one foot in front of the other. I had no idea where I was going to get this money. No idea. To this day, if you ask me I don't know how we did it, right? And I think that now takes us to that point where if you've listened for this long already, you're probably asking yourself, well, how do I know if I should start a business? What are the things I should be asking myself? What are the things that I kind of know, yes, what the things I should be doing are I should be giving more than I receive. I should be looking at how I can capture value. All these are great ideas. But Nance, if you could your top 3, right? Now we're talking into the practical things. What should I do now? What would your top 3 be in terms of, yes, I've ticked these 3 boxes. I'm ready to start business.
Well, one I think would be clarify your why. It's very clear to understand why you are starting a business, and whether that's, a business that you're going to go out and be an entrepreneur. Because some of us,
what if my business is I need money? I'm broke. I need money. Is that a good reason?
To start a business?
Yes.
It's a valid reason.
You dodged that. So it might not be a good reason, but it's a valid reason.
It might not be a good reason, but it's a valid reason. I think it's an incomplete reason. because...
Oh, that's deep. Yeah, incomplete.
Because business requires and demands so much. There are other ways to make money if your problem
Like get
is
a
money.
job.
Like get a job.
Oh my goodness.
And many people
that was deep.
are starting a business, but actually all they're doing is starting a job for themselves.
Yes.
It's not a business.
Yes.
Because that business cannot sustain itself without them. They have to be there all the time. It's not necessarily bringing in anything that can, continue to be poured back into the business. It's just a job.
It's
really.
just a job.
They work
Yeah.
themselves into a job.
So you've substituted your boss for your client.
Exactly.
Your client is now your boss.
There you
Ergo.
go. And if you're happy with that, that's fine.
And that happened to me for a long time. Actually, I was very much employed, right? And thinking that people say, I want to have freedom of time. I want to, make money for myself. No, now you are responsible for other people's salaries and you work even longer hours and all of that. And that's what I mean by like digging a little deeper into that. Yeah. So one, that's number one, right?
Clarify
your
why. I think that's...
And we're not here to tell you what the right why is.
Yes, that's
either.
Up to you. Yeah. But you've got to be clear about what your why is, because if you don't know why, then you'll get to the end and say, oh, wait, this is not the ladder I wanted to climb.
What's your why for starting a business?
My why? My why is I want to die empty.
Bro.
Was that too...
a bit heavy for 12 o'clock, but
you asked.
I did. This Nancy always hits me with, you want to die empty. Yeah, I think we shouldn't qualify that. Yeah. It's so deep and profound. I think whoever's listening will understand
it. Yes. Yeah. It doesn't need to be explained. But yes, that's my why. Everything I have, I want to.
You want to give
to use.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And there are other whys, including, the financial and all that, and equity and sustainability, freedom of time. Mm-hmm. But the main why is that. And so once you've clarified your why, I think you need a clear-eyed assessment, because the Bible says, count the cost. Who goes out to
count
do something?
The cost.
And
so your first is know your why. Your second is count the cost.
Second is
count the cost is what? Know if you're willing to give up Netflix on a Friday and Saturday night to be sitting there doing invoicing and talking.
Talk to people who are doing this thing.
Oh, yeah.
And find
that's
out
a
what
really
is it
good
really
one.
Like.
Actually, I love that one. Look for someone in that industry who's doing really well. Buy them a coffee, take them out. I did that when I wanted to expand the agency to the United Kingdom. Woohoo! Wow. Let's not get into that because we're going to derail this whole conversation. Let's say I walked out of that
thinking, I don't want to do this.
I absolutely don't want to do this. Yes.
And that's exactly what it means to count the cost, is you take a clear-eyed look, because so many times we want people's mountains, but we don't want to
their valleys.
Yeah. We don't want to thank you for finishing that. Or we don't want what it took, for them to scale that mountain.
They say the grass is greener on the other side, but the water bill is higher.
Is higher. Mm-hmm. So my way of asking myself if I ever want something is not to say, oh, do I want that thing? Is to ask, do I want what it took to get that thing?
Yes.
Am I happy with that pain? Do I like that pain?
Do I like that pain?
Can I manage?
Can I do hours and hours of research? Can I rehearse? Can I get in front of the mirror? Can I? It's a lot.
Yeah. Do I have what it takes
to power through that?
Yeah.
Third one.
So that would be the second thing. And I think the third one, as you're getting on your way to starting the business. So you've looked at your why, you've counted the cost. And I think the third one is you just have to take action. Do something. Doesn't matter how small. Get out of the planning. Do something. Take a step. Without faith, it is impossible to please God. Faith without works is dead. You need to put some action into what you're believing for.
Absolutely.
Because I think so many ideas stay in that stage where they're not getting anywhere. Before you have
you overthink it.
Plan, you overthink it.
You're like, oh, it needs to be.
You will learn
perfect.
As you go. You will learn as you go. Feedback will come. There will be iterations. But I think those would be my top three things. Yeah.
I love that.
Would you add anything to that?
I would say, think of what your leverage is. And I'm only saying this because...
Okay, use a simpler term than leverage, please.
Leverage.
We don't want this jargon mumbo jumbo here.
Excuse me. No, it's a valid point. Simplify it. Leverage. Think of what you bring that nobody else can, or what you have that you can use that can give you what would look to the world like an unfair advantage. Let me explain. I was on radio. I was fairly well known. That could work two ways. I used to walk in rooms and some people would hate me because of my views. I was very vocal on radio. For example, I was not one to tolerate cheating men. So I was very well known for that.
Don't know why that would be controversial, but okay.
Are you kidding?
I know.
Uganda, that's so controversial. Okay, yeah. No. This is not a male bashing session. Anyway, so I had a personality, and people, like it or not, kind of like when you don't stand for everything. Even if they don't do business, they don't like you, but at least they know you have a point of view, you're willing to defend it. And that was my leverage. My leverage was that I'm a known face and I have a lot to lose. If I do work for you and it turns out bad, my brand is going to suffer. So that made people take a risk with me. And that was an unfair advantage that a competitor would not have. So you usually have some leverage in your life.
Yeah.
There's usually something.
May not be that. May be location. It may be education. It may be insider knowledge.
Let me tell you a funny piece of leverage someone had. Their parents were born in, I think it was Nigeria. They had a UK passport. They had American passport, and they had, I think, citizenship in South Africa. That was leverage. The company that hired them hired him because he had access to 3 markets without having to need visas and stuff like that. Now it seems silly, right? But I'm using a silly example to illustrate the fact that leverage comes from so many different ways. You might have leverage because you know a particular language that nobody knows. So I think, look at that. And I take this example because it's not the ones you find in the books. When people say, how do I know if I should start a business? Do you have leverage? What is your leverage?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Like consider that, right? This one is me personally. I always felt free. Let me explain that. Even when I was employed, I never felt like I was chasing freedom. I didn't feel like having to work long hours was putting me in a prison. And Nancy knows this because she's like, I don't know how you can sit at a desk for 7 hours.
Is that because you loved what you did?
I chased meaning, not freedom.
No, it's too complicated for us.
No, because it's too complicated.
What do you mean?
For me, I needed meaning in my work. I needed to find,
so could you have found that meaning in any work? Or is it the meaning coming from the fact that the work you were doing was aligned?
I have the ability to create meaning wherever I am. Even if I'm in a job that's like selling solar panels, I find meaning. I create my meaning. I say, look, I'm creating light, electricity for I create meaning because I already have freedom. Even if I'm in a 9 to 5, I don't have the mentality that I'm sitting here and someone is employing me and woe is me, I can't do the things that I want to do. No. The meaning, I'll create it there. I will do the things. If it means on the weekend when I have free time, I'm going to literally carve that out and spend time with my kids and be intentional and deliberate about it. You have to be able to create meaning for yourself. Don't look for that meaning in the job, in the passion project or whatever. And I think
that's so hard.
It's sometimes. So hard, but it's so freeing though. It's so freeing.
Is it possible in every situation? Aren't there some jobs where it's like, look, you just have to get out. There's no amount
if you're cleaning
of trying
toilets,
to create meaning. Is that the case? Or are you saying you can create meaning in any job?
Have you seen janitors who absolutely love their jobs? Have you seen traffic policemen who are directing traffic in South Africa and they're dancing? I'm not saying everyone can do that. But look, do you want to know how you can do that? Or do you want to just sit there and continue to be miserable? That is also a choice.
So is it fair to say the choice is you either get out or you create meaning?
100%.
You have to do one of the two.
That's fair. And if you cannot create meaning, then get out. Okay. By all means. Meaning means. But my point exactly is that we talked about talking about the non-obvious things, right? And for me, that's been my experience, is that as I grow older, I've looked back and said, you know what? You actually have an interesting skill in that you create meaning in in ways that don't create a problem for you, because other people create meanings that create problems for them.
Like what?
Oh, this job doesn't pay me enough, so I'm not going to do more. They don't pay me enough. I wish I could get a better paying job, but how much are you giving? You're not even giving 80% at your job.
I think I understand what you mean.
Are you going to translate? Are you going to mansplain me now? Are you going to translate what I'm saying?
No. I'm just telling you how I understand it. Because initially I thought you meant being happy with your job, but that's not what you mean.
No.
And I think for me, the meaning I had to create was I am being faithful with what God has given me. And that was my meaning. So it didn't matter what it was.
Yes, yes.
And so there are different ways to get the meaning.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
My last one that has come from my own experiences and what I've done. It's an intertwined one. You keep seeing a better way to do things and you're already acting like an owner. These are two ways in which you know you're ready to own a business or start your own business. What do I mean? There are people in companies who already have a sense of ownership. They are doing things, they're going above and beyond. And that was me. I was putting up my hand for extra work. Before I was made a director in the company, I was already acting like a director. Like I was that person who's chasing guys. Like, have you done
chasing
this?
guys?
No, chasing guys for stuff. When I say chasing guys, not chasing men, like chasing people for stuff that really, it wasn't necessarily in my job description, right? But someone had to do it and I was willing to do it again, because that's where I was finding my meaning. And I think that got me spotted. And my boss was like, well, you're already acting like owner. Would you like to be a director in the company? It wasn't that simple, but I was seen. He saw me for what I was doing. And that was not my intention. My intention was not to be on the board of directors. My intention was not even for ownership, like you were saying, which is a great thing. But look how it ended up that way. Simply because you're already acting like an owner. You're already doing more than you should. But also you can see a better way to do things. This is critical because this is a skill. If you walk in and you say, oh, this is how you guys invoice. Oh, there's a better way to invoice. It means that you already have a natural aptitude for improving things and you've got a skill set that can actually add value and capture value. You see how I've gone full circle, but it's so, so important. Not everybody has that. Not everybody can see how to capture value. So if you're one of those people who can see that, chances are you will do well in business and you will do well because you will see things that most people can't. And that's what we don't talk about. We kind of treat having a business like everyone can do it. And the truth is not everyone can, not everyone needs to, not everyone should. And that's not a bad thing. To own a business, it doesn't matter. Some of us are entrepreneurs, right? We go into companies and you work well within that structure. Why do we make it seem like you're not worthy of applause unless you're an entrepreneur, you start a business? That's not true. If we're all entrepreneurs, who's going to work in the business? AI.
Yes. That was the wrong example because that's where we're going.
And with that, we come to the end of another session. Do you want to add any last thoughts to whether or not, how do I know if I should start a business or not?
No, I think that everyone is designed to have dominion. I don't think everyone is, ownership. I just think there are different ways to have that. And if you're not cut out for doing a business, there are other ways in which you can capture value, have equity, have ownership. So it's something you can explore. But I think you've perfectly summed up, if you do feel called to start a business, what you should be looking at
100%.
And how you should approach it. And I think, with the Bible, it's very interesting that lots of huge discussions can be summed up if you just follow its simple instructions. For instance, the Bible just says, work as unto God. And if you just do that, you're good. Everything.
Every metric.
Talking about, right? See? Every metric.
We have 2 metrics. We show up and we pray. That's it. The rest, not up to us. I love that. So with that, we come to the end of another episode. Please like and subscribe, share with someone who you think could find value from this content. There's so many other nuggets that we weren't able to fit into this discussion that Nancy and I are going to create an ebook for where you can refer to it at will. And it's going to be free, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. 3,000. Only. So we will link that in the description where you can get on the waiting list so we can send you that information. Stay blessed, stay amazing, and we will speak to you next time.
Thank you for watching. Goodbye.
Bye.